السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله، وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وشر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. الحمد لله رب العالمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this opportunity to get together, to eat together, and to reflect on the book of Allah. The best of gathering, the gathering that's in it is the mention of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best knowledge is the knowledge about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the best path is the path of Allah and the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inshaa Allah, today we'll start reflecting on a surah in the Quran, Surah Maryum. That is a surah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it is mentioning many of the messengers and the prophets who came before us, and in it a lot of reminders of the life of some of the prophets of Allah in details and some in general way. And it is a surah that is in it the family of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, going back to Ibrahim alayhi salam, mentioning some of their qualities and the message that they all brought, the message of Islam, and how in some of the mention about individuals who went through difficulties and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took care of them, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us from the mentioning of details of events that happened before to a mention of what happens after death, what happens in the hereafter. And the surah ends with some details of certain people, not individual, but people who carry qualities, certain qualities, and what is the punishment for these qualities, or for those people that carries these qualities. And then the mentioning of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the mentioning of uh, the words that people of the book carries, and how in a way of kufr it is, the way of shirk it is. When we read the Quran, we read about mainly three issues. One, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us with what Allah does. And second, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remind us about what we should do and should not do. And one, Allah will remind us about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is Allah, the one we worship? So you open any part of the Quran, you find the theme around those 3 points. If it is directly about these 3 points, or indirectly about stories of the past, it will be about those points in a way of implementation of the lack of those who came before us. Okay? So you'll find that topic, which is the topic of Tawheed. Those 3 points summarize what Tawheed is. And if we think about ourselves and our lives, we'll find our lives are about those 3 points. Okay? What's around us, that it is from Allah, which is everything. What we're doing, which is should be in the way of Allah, and the attributes of Allah around us that we can reflect on. So you're about to do something. You say, La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. Now this testimony, you're saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who's given me this gift of ability to do something. So I will not be able to do anything except by the will of Allah. So therefore, it should be what I'm doing, should be on the path of Allah. That's what Allah does and what you should do. And then also the attributes of Allah within this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Rahman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-Wakil, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Qadir, al-Hakim, in all what we do. So, he is miserable, the one that goes in life without remembering Allah or noticing what Allah does for him and around him, and without realizing that he should be serving Allah in everything that he does, and he is not reflecting on the attributes of Allah all around. Truly a miserable one. A believer is the one that's trying hard to implement all 3 all the time. And it is difficult. But once one gets used to it, one leads a life that has a special feeling to it, a special taste. And I say this word because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used this word in the hadith. Okay, the word taste. ذاق طعم الإيمان. Tasted the ta'am of Iman. So it is, something that you could enjoy. So we can increase this awareness of this path of those 3 points by reflecting on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, by reflecting about the life and the path of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So we'll think about this and try to look at these 3 points as we're going along. Okay, and how much Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminded us of it directly, indirectly, through stories, through events, and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins Surah Maryum by al-huruf al-muqatta'a, the letters that are pronounced by their names, not by their sounds. We do not pronounce the letters as we speak by their names. We pronounce it by their sound. The Book of Allah, the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give it to us in a way of connection. It is all connected. Connected meaning the verse is followed by another, and you can actually connect them and continue. And if you do so, it is acceptable. And you find, من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الناسي has a kasra in it. Not that you do not stop. You can put a kasra and you pronounce the kasra من الجنة والناس بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. And you continue. Even you go around, you start and you finish. Rasulullah sallam made dua for those who are the rahil mutahid, that the one who's traveling and then keeps going and keeps going, meaning the one who finishes the Quran and keeps starting, finishes and keeps starting. But when it comes to those letters, you cannot connect them. It is disconnected. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed it that way. So the surah starts with kaf, the letter kaf. You call it by the name, not by the sound, and you stop. You do not say kafun. You do not say kafun, ha'un, no. Kaf, ha, ya, ayn, sad. So why it is this way and what is this signifies and so forth, we talked about it many times, but at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no one asked about it, Muslim or non-Muslim. And after these ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us with the dhikr, with the book of Allah, with the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the way it is, and we take it as it is. And the Quran is read in a tawqifi way, meaning you read it as you heard it. There was no rules of tajweed, and there was no such a thing as tajweed before the Quran was revealed. No Arabic was read in the way the Quran was read. But when the Quran was revealed, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam pronounced it just like Jibreel alayhi salam pronounced it, and the companions followed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from a mouth to an ear with it. So this is how it is pronounced. Then eventually the scholars put some rules to these pronunciations and called it certain names and so forth, so we know how to teach it, and it will be easier to understand and so forth. But yet the Quran will not be taught how to be read except from a mouth or an ear. This is special with the Quran. Nobody can give you a book, tell you, in this book I'll tell you the way of tajweed, and read the book and memorize it, and you'll be able to read the Quran properly. Impossible. We'll give you a book, tell you what idgham is, what idhar is, what iqlab is, what ikhfa is, and what is this and what is that, and try to describe it to you. But unless you hear it, you'll not be able to follow it. So the Quran has to be from a mouth to an ear, to be read properly. And the Quran is very special because it is the word of Allah. And you find those who memorize and have good memories, they can And those who don't even have good memories, they can memorize and remember poems. You may remember rhymes that they were taught when they were young children or young men and women. They will remember with no problem at all. But when it comes to the Quran will leave you if you leave it. No matter how much you memorized it. But if you don't keep revisiting it, it will let go of you. The Quran is too honorable to stay with you if you don't take care of it. It's not going to, if you don't deal with it in a way of compassion and love and care, it's going to leave you. And we know this, all of us know, our predecessors know this, told us that, and Rasulullah ﷺ told us that it is like the camel that you must tie, otherwise it will leave you. So, when Rasulullah ﷺ spoke as an unlettered man who did not know how to read and write, he shouldn't been able to talk too much about the name of the letters. He will only know the sounds of the letters. So when he, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, would mention the names of the letters in this way, most likely people around, they would have the impression to say, who told you to say so? Okay? Like when two people are speaking, you do not know, one of them does not know how to read and write, you could not tell who's the one who doesn't know how to read and write. Because both of them are the sounds of the letter coming out of your mouth. And both of them, they know the sound of the letters. But if the one who knows how to read and write spells something out, a word for the person who does not know how to read and write, he will not be able to quite understand what he means. Because once you pronounce the letters by itself, the other person has to imagine those letters, put them together, and then pronounce it, read it. And if you cannot read, you cannot know what this word is if it is spelled out for you, not pronounced for you in its totality. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he uses the word, the letters as their names, that is indication that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was told to say so. Now, this is ذكر رحمة ربك عبده زكريا. The mention and remembrance of the mercy of Allah. And throughout Surah Maryum, this only one attribute is used, is Ar-Rahman. Throughout the whole surah, only one attribute is used as far as I know, as far as I remember. Only Ar-Rahman. And some scholars say that Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the Rahmah, is the name of Allah, Al-A'zam, the great name of Allah, or the greatest name of Allah. And Rasulullah ﷺ mentioned to us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a particular name that if you call Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through that name, Allah will respond to your dua. Aisha radiallahu anha said, what is it, Ya Rasulullah? Rasulullah ﷺ did not tell her. Okay? And Rasulullah ﷺ knew it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give us this information with not quite complete to encourage us to come close to Allah. Jum'ah will be a day, an hour in Jum'ah that is special, the dua is acceptable. Which hour we do not quite know. There is speculation here and there. Okay? And so forth and so on. So now Zakaria alayhi salam, he was a prophet from the Israelites. A prophet from the prophets that came between Musa alayhi salam and Isa alayhi salam. Many of them. So he was an old man. He became an old man. His wife never had children and could not have any children. And she herself now is very old. But Zakaria alayhi salam did not make that dua to have a son. This is something that is very special, and it's a mind, it lights our mind with information, that one can have a knowledge of something that very deep, but it stays there and it is not quite used until one reminds him with it. One remind him with it, meaning Zakaria alayhi salam was reminded by Maryam alayhi salam to make dua. How he was reminded? When Maryam alayhi salam, Zakaria alayhi salam was taking care of her, he would come into the mihrab where she is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was the one who is taking care of her. He was her caretaker. And then he would go in and see food that he did not bring to her. So he asked her, "Anna laki hada?" How do you get it? Where did you get it? And how you get it, and so forth. And where do you get it from? And some tafsir says that he found there things that fruits and food that is not available around. It's impossible for someone to bring her this food. So it is not just impossible for someone to bring the food because he's the only one who brings it, but also the kind of food it is very strange. So Maryam alayhi salam, she said, "Huwa min indillah." It is from Allah. Inna Allah yarzuqu man yasha'u bighayri hisab. She responded to him in a very straightforward, naive way, if you will, straightforward, saying, "It is from Allah, food, it is from Allah, and Allah gives whoever He wants without the means." Just like that, right? That reminds you with the fresh attitude that those who enter Islam, for example, have, or the children who are learning about Deen have. You find some sisters who just accept Islam and professional women, born and lived in the United States and so forth, and they choose Islam as their deen, then they go and put hijab on immediately. Then you find some sisters who born and raised in Islam, they're wondering because they themselves have difficulties with this. So they go to her and say, how could you do this? She said, "Well, I heard that this is what Rasulullah said, what Allah said." None. I mean, what else? I mean, this is, isn't it? And they are, yeah, okay. So why are you asking? Okay. So Maryam alayhi salam, she's answering, Zakaria alayhi salam, food from Allah. And Allah gives whoever wants without means, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, هُنَالِكَ دَعَى زَكَرِيَّا رَبَّهُ. That's when Zakaria called Allah and said, "I want a son." Right? That is when he remembered that. Of course, he knew it is something that she taught him. No, he's the one who taught her that. He's the one who taught her that. But the way she said it and the way it was there, it lit a light bulb, if you will, in his mind, and he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us the moment that thought came to the mind of Zakaria alayhi salam. How beautiful that is. Okay? Then هنالك دعا زكريا رب قال رب هب لي من لدنك ذرية طيبة إنك سميع الدعاء. Oh my Lord, give me a ذرية that is طيبة, a good offspring. You are all hearing of the dua. So, and that also, it shows us that the qadr in the dua, the qadr in the dua, okay? You make dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Id'uni astajib lakum." You call on me, I will respond to you. But also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallam told us that the aqdar of the creation, the decrees for everything that would happen in this life, it was written 50,000 years before the creation. So when you make a dua, does dua make a difference? Since everything was written 50,000 years before the creation? And when Rasulullah ﷺ says the dua goes up and the qadr of Allah come down, they meet in the middle and they fight and the qadr takes, the dua takes over. Does that mean your dua will change the qadr? Or the qadr is written before we were created 50,000 years and it's not, your dua is not going to make any difference? Well, this, as we were talking about a few weeks ago, that it has two extremes and it has the middle understanding. One extreme saying, why would you make a dua and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wrote the qadr anyway, decreed the qadr. So your dua, it is useless to make dua. But if one says that, he is saying eventually or actually that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us with something in the Quran that is useless. Give you a command that has no value. Call me and make dua to me, I will respond to you. And that is unacceptable to say that. To say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has just given us a command that has no value. And the other extreme saying the dua, as the hadith said, the dua will go up, the qadr will come down, and dua will take over. Therefore, I'm going to make dua and to change the qadr. So now, what is the value of the qadr then? So are you the one who's going to determine your life just giving the dua and is accepted that it has to take over and so forth? But our understanding is the dua must be given and the qadr must arrive as a decree, and both of them has to be done. Meaning that we in our rizq, we wake up every morning and go to work. But when you are asked, is what you're going to make today, is it written for you? You say yes. So you say, so why do you go to work? They say, I have to go to work because I have to take the means. But then when I get the result, it is from Allah, and that is the rizq that's written for me. The dua is similar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to make dua, so we make dua, and that is the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shown us how to go in this way, and the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come. So you must make the dua and the qadr is coming. And the qadr is from Allah and the dua you must do. There is no difference than the rest. But what is the value of this? The value of this dynamic. Okay? The two extremes becomes helpless. Meaning, if one says my dua is not going to change anything, okay, then they're not going to do much of movement in earth. And the one who's saying that my dua is going to change the qadr, he just makes the dua and does not move in earth either. Okay? Both of them are idle with that way of thinking. But the one in the middle who's making the dua and waiting for the qadr of Allah is the one between the two levels of al-khawf wa raja. Al-khawf wa raja, fearing and hope, which is the maqam al-tama. Al-tama, you're hoping, you are being in that sense of you want what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you, and you're making dua and you're getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you're waiting for that which is coming to you. And that dynamic and that understanding keeps you moving in earth and keeps you close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It makes that relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala healthy and correct. Just like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَرْزُقُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ, He gives whoever he wants without the means. But yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asks us to give sadaqah, asks us to give zakah. So why give zakah when Allah will give to the poor? Why give sadaqah when Allah will take care of the poor? In this movement, there is a connection. Our life is a life of relationship. Our deen is the deen of relationship. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala encourages us to have these relationships between one another. So one will connect, the one who has connected with the one that does not have. And there is a dynamic between them that brings the best of humanity. You are in need, Allah has what you need, and Allah will give you what you need, but you have to ask for what you need and wait for it to come or not come, or when it is coming. That dynamic between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enhances the relationship between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore it enhances us as human beings, who we are. And it takes us closer to our potential. Remember, our deen is about relationships. About relationships with ourselves. One with himself. Okay? When Ibn al-Qayyim, as we talked about him a few weeks ago, about when he gave the dua and the answer was delayed, he said. And then he found his nafs now is kind of changing. It's uneasy. So he said, he talked to his nafs, a relationship with himself, with himself. He said, like what is wrong with you? Don't you know that are you the one, Malika and Mamluka, are you the one who have ownership, or you being owned? هل أنت مدبرة أم مدبرة لها? Are you the one who makes things happen and plan things, or things that happens to you, like wake up, and who is he talking to? To himself, right? And he keeps on and on and on in this sense to tame himself. And finally he said that his nafs now tamed and understood and became calm. That is a relationship between one and himself. So this nafs could be nafs ammara bis-su', could be nafs al-lawama, could be nafs al-mutma'inna. Could be nafs that is commanding one to do bad, is the nafs could be a nafs that is blame its owner, and the nafs could be in peace. It depends on how you're dealing with it. That is a relationship. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rasulullah sallallahu teaches us how to have that relationship with the nafs. You are in control of it, you should not let it to be in control of you. And then we have our relationship with our spouses and our children and our community, and what to do and what not to do, and the best of manners, and the best among you, the closest of you with me in the day of judgment in Jannah are the one who's ahasinukum akhlaqa, the one who has the best of manners, and so forth. Rasulullah sallallahu tells us. So the relationship is what our deen about, with everything. So Zakaria alayhi salam asked for a son. It is 7:35 p.m. as the watch says. So Inshaa Allah we have to stop here. Muslim brothers would like to pray and leave. And Inshaa Allah we'll start again, not next week, the following week. Next week Inshaa Allah we have our brother Damani Ingram. You know him. If you don't know him by name, you know him by face. He's been around, in the community, a pillar of the community for a long time. He wants to come and share his journey to Islam. He's been Muslim for a long time. I remember him when he, when Dar Taqwa was in an office building in Wild Lake Shopping Center. He used to come and pray with us there when he first, becoming a Muslim and so forth. And he has a lot of, feelings and stories and things for us to realize and for us to appreciate what we have and so forth. And being a lawyer, he can really articulate his points very well. So Inshaa Allah, he will be coming next week, and at the same time, between Maghrib and Isha, Inshaa Allah. And we'll come and eat something and listen to him and his journey and talk, have a conversation with him. And the following week again, we'll start this halaqah, Inshaa Allah. If anyone would like to make any comments, Inshaa Allah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاكم الله خيرا.